Jeremy James Davidson. I grew up in Peterborough, Ontario, and have moved all over the place across Canada, and I'm planning on moving back to Toronto within the month. I went to Ryerson University. I recently graduated with a marketing degree, and I hope to study in Com within the next year. Within my family, I have 4 sisters, and then my parents were divorced approximately 12 years ago, so 2 of them are half-sisters. For, I guess, the first 10 to 12 years of my life was relatively normal, like any other child, I guess, because my parents were together. After that, there's been various struggles up and down. I've moved 23 times within 22 years that I've been alive, and we all have our struggles, so special memories that I remember from my childhood would be simple as camping with my parents or driving to Nova Scotia to stay there a night and coming back the next day, and just always traveling around Canada anyways. We went to church on Sundays anyways and would have Sunday school or whatever, and I guess you wouldn't really say we're that practicing of a Christian family as most people. Obviously, our focus as a child was to we were so happy about Christmas and Easter and Valentine's Day, anything like that we'd always celebrate, and even till recently, like, my family still wants me to come out and join them during those occasions too, even though I don't celebrate. I'd still go just for the family. I did believe in what I followed until the end of grade 12 pretty much, which was early 2010. I started having doubts about why Christians would say you only have to have faith and deeds don't really matter. So I was looking at the aspect of Judaism to see, like, these laws are here for a reason. You can't just abolish them suddenly. As a child, I didn't really read the Bible. I'd go and I'd see other kids that'd be memorizing Bible quotes or whatever, but I didn't have too much of an interest until, I'd say, the last year of high school, when I started to look into things more, and then that's when I found out that it wasn't exactly what I thought it was, and it just didn't seem to have any logical connection there. So initially when I converted, actually my mom was trying to tell me, like, oh, this is terrorist religion, it oppresses women, it's all the standard things that people are saying. But when I first moved to my father's for, I guess it was grade 12, there was a Muslim person who came to the door knocking, saying that we're going to have Friday prayers in the park, and if you want to come, then come out. And I was interested to see what it was, so I was going to go, but my father told me not to go because this is some cult and all this stuff. And since I grew up in Peterborough most of my life, it was mainly more white people, more Christians, so I never really encountered Muslims. My first interaction with Islam was in grade 11 when I was, well, all my friends just did whatever together. So we had a couple Muslim friends. We didn't really know were Muslim until later on in the year. And when they said a few things like they're still in the 1400s, we just laughed it off and made fun of them a little about being so far behind in their time. And my journey to Islam started when I was fasting for the month of Ramadan. It was still me objecting to the idea of Islam and still pushing Christianity towards the one sister who was talking to me about that. And within the first month of university, I took a philosophy of religion course. So that was really helping me open my mind to other beliefs, the fact that there actually were many other beliefs outside of my own, which obviously very ignorant, just like most people in this world, to be honest. But within the first month, I would walk past the brother doing dawah in Dundas Square every day, and he would be handing out copies of different books, copies of the Quran. And I took a copy of the Quran, ended up setting it on my shelf, didn't open it or anything. After walking by him a few times, when I converted on the 29th of September, I ended up walking past him, going to school, and then something told me I just had to go back and talk to him. So when I went back to talk to him to get questions and answers clarified, I ended up speaking to him for 3 hours and converting right there in Dundas Square. When I converted to Islam, there was a bit of research. I hated reading until about 2 years ago, actually, so I didn't do a lot of reading, but from what I did know, it made far more sense to follow Islam than it did to follow Christianity, because Islam's the only religion where it's you and God with nothing else in between. There's no need for any intercessor. The turning point for me becoming a Muslim was after the Ramadan that I had fasted. I began going to Ryerson University, and a couple of my liberals, I took philosophy, and one was philosophy of religion, in which I ended up becoming a lot more open to the idea that there were other beliefs in this world rather than just my own. So once I started to consider that with everything else that I already knew about Islam, then it started to make far more sense that it was only you and God, with obviously prophets and all the other beliefs along with Islam, but the very fact that you didn't need to have a person to be your God was the fundamental belief that brought me to Islam. The first time I came across the Quran was when I was cleaning out the house for an elder man the year before the year before I started Ryerson University. He was a German guy. He had a bunch of books that he was giving away while I was cleaning out. So because I'm German, I just picked up a couple books about Nazis just because of my interest in World War II, and I picked up a copy of the Quran that was there. And I opened it when I got home just to see, and then once I saw a title like The Cow, to me it seemed more like a storybook, and I just set it back down. I didn't bother opening it again until much later on. My perception of the Quran initially was that it was still the Bible, just in Arabic. And that was many other people's perception too. One time I went to a Coptic church, and because they were all people from Egypt, the ignorance in the people that came from our church, I questioned it as like, is this the Quran within the bench here? I didn't know what it meant. I just thought it was another version of the Bible. I didn't realize there were other books in this world other than the Bible itself. The chapter that most inspired me after becoming Muslim was obviously Surah Al-Fatiha, just because you recite it so often, and when I had Maulana Rizvi explain a couple of the ayats, it really made me realize that this is the only religion that is truly monotheistic, and it really helped me within my struggles towards Islam. When I reverted to Islam, it was on September 29th of 2010. I was talking to a brother doing dawah in Dundas Square. He was a Salafi brother, and he gave me a bunch of information, a bunch of different books, and I tried to challenge him with what I knew anyways of religion, and everything he said made so much sense that all my questions were answered. It was within 3 hours anyways, and the next week he invited me to learn how to pray. So then when I went to the masjid with him, he was just teaching me how to do wudu and how to pray salah, and for a while I didn't end up actually consistently praying until I think 8 months later. Initially I told my mother about my decision to revert to Islam, and she wasn't really okay with it. Her perceptions about Islam were obviously that was a very dangerous religion in her mind, and she spoke to the pastor, and he was saying that I've studied Islam and this is a very dangerous religion to get into, and that it's a cult and all these things, and ended up having to tell my father a few months later anyways, because I used to drink throughout high school, so my father and I would have a beer once in a while, go to whatever place, and they never asked for ID or anything. But when I was finally legal, which was a couple months later after converting, he asked me if I wanted to go for my first legal drink, and that's when I had to tell him why I didn't want to drink anymore. So he wasn't so okay with me converting to Islam though. My experience with born Muslims has been to either side of the scale anyways. Most of the time it was them being very generous, them trying to help me out all the time, trying to teach me various things about Islam. And at first I didn't realize, I just accepted information from whoever was giving me it and didn't realize the importance of a scholar at the time. But they are also the same people who led me astray of following the Ahl Bayt. So I was in between Sunni and Shia numerous times throughout the past 3.5 years. I started out following Salafi Islam, went to Shia Islam, back to Sunni Islam, and then back once again. My first Ramadan after I had converted anyways, it was a much greater experience than the first one because I was going to the masjid every night. I had a family that was taking me from Newmarket to Jaffrey and Richmond Hill. And just the fact that I could have halal meat every night and hear the Quran being recited by all these different people at the same time, it was just absolutely beautiful, with lectures every night too. And that was the one time I really started to learn a lot more about Islam. The reason I chose to follow the path of the Ahlul Bayt was due to various things. As I said, I started following Salafi Islam, not knowing there were different sects. And then after a while I was introduced to Shia Islam, so they told me to just come to the mosque and see what it was like. And I came out for a while. I didn't really know the different beliefs. I was just told it's political, you don't really need to worry about the issues right now. So I began to go to a couple lectures from Asad Jaffrey, and he had a few lectures on Friday nights, and I learned a bit there. And then for a while I ended up going to the Sunni masjid that was near my school. And because all my friends were Sunni at the time, they always invited me to a different mosque and go to Jummah at Ryerson as well. So a lot of Salafi infiltration was in my mind. And once I accepted the Ahlul Bayt, I didn't really know the differences still at the time. And I went back to Sunni Islam once again after the first Muharram, not really understanding. And then after doing a fair bit of reading, I understood what Shia Islam was and why we are to follow the Quran and Ahlul Bayt, how it's in Sahih Muslim, Sahih Bukhari, and just that it's the most obvious in all books of Hadith for the right path. Over the past few years, I've encountered several sects of Islam, obviously Sunni being the most prevalent there, but there's been a few Ismailis which I haven't been really able to have deep conversation with. There's been Ahmadiyyas who invited me out to some of their programs, which I've actually gone to and stuff, but I had to speak up about some of the things they were saying because it was a multi-faith event. And I've spoken with multiple Sufis, I've spoken with all different types of Muslims actually, who always are trying to pull me towards the path that they think is the truth. When I started following the Ahlul Bayt, I was obviously ridiculed many times by people of other sects of Islam, and there was so much ridicule, so many things that they said that I wasn't sure if it was true or not, so I'd have to go and ask the Maulana to see which was true and which was not. And it was almost every time I'd go into a masjid, I'd be asked, like, why are you praying on this stone? Why do you lift your hands up in qunut? Why do you put your arms down beside you? And after learning all the answers to these and that it's actually in Sunni sources as well, it's a lot easier to deal with other people. Islam has changed my life in many different ways. It's gone from me drinking in high school and only focusing on girls at the time to actually caring about what my religion is, what my hereafter is going to be, what God actually is compared to what I knew it to be, which was just someone who would forgive you for your sins, so I didn't bother really try hard in my life. So it's definitely helped me with all my relationships, with my family, with people on a day-to-day basis, with even being able to sit right here, right now, being the shyest kid in all of my classes. I've had to speak so many times to other people that I at least can get out of my shell a little more sometimes. When I converted to Islam, there's been many difficulties, primarily with family issues, but outside of that, it's been ridicule from other sects of Muslims on a constant basis usually. And even if I'm doing dawah at Dundas Square or something, obviously you're going to have people all the time who will come up to you and be like, you're a terrorist, you're this, you're that, and you can't really take it to heart. But there's been many struggles that just come with being a believer. These challenges definitely made me stronger in many ways. It's difficult to constantly remind yourself what you're going through might not be the worst thing right now. And it's easy to get to the level of despair, even though that's considered one of the worst sins to actually commit. And it's so easy to preach, but once you try to actually implement things in your life, it becomes far more difficult. And it's definitely changed me a lot, though, in the past 4 years now. The first 3 years of university were also my first 3 years of being Muslim, and I had a lot of support because there were mosques all over the place. The main issue was in my third year, I lived right downtown Toronto, and I lived beside a Wahhabi masjid, and I'd go there all the time to pray, and never really had issues at first, but then there started being many issues, and they'd start trying to push their beliefs on me and tell me that I shouldn't pray in this mosque, and that one person even told me, I'd rather marry a Jew or a Christian than pray next to you. And like, there's been many different struggles anyways, but it's just something that you have to accept as a follower of the Ahl Bayt. Within the Christian community anyways, the church I grew up in for many years of my life, I know the pastor still, and my family still goes to the church. So once in a while on a Sunday I'll still go with them to the church, but I've had to tell my family once in a while, like, I'm just gonna sit out while they're playing the music and stuff, because for me personally, I can't stand to listen to them singing about how Jesus is God, and it just really affects my heart. So I'll still go with them to church, I'll listen to the lecture and stuff and try to talk to different people as well. But there's also a pastor that lives across from me at the moment, and he's been there since I was really young, and recently I ended up talking to him because when I was in grade 6, he ended up donating Christmas presents to us from his church because my parents had just been divorced and my mom couldn't afford anything. So his church decided to get together and give us presents. So I decided recently, like, to thank him and everything for all that he did at that time, way back then. That was absolutely unnecessary too. And we've gone out for coffee a few times, and I've given him the perspective about Islam, and he's talked about Christianity, and I gave him a copy of the Quran, which he's now read through as well. And he has actually learned a lot from me, surprisingly, about Islam that he had no idea about, simply due to the fact that he grew up in Peterborough and only ever knew Christianity. The one thing I've had an issue with in the Shia masjid was, you'll hear people say that dawah should be done through your actions, not so much through handing out a book or sitting on the street preaching to people. But the problem is there's very few people whose actions can stand up to the test of actually showing what Islam is. So many people will look at your actions, and if you expect them to judge you by your actions to accept Islam, then you shouldn't say something different when you say, don't judge me by my actions because I'm doing this wrong, judge Islam itself. So there's been a big contradiction there within what some of the mosques are trying to get people to do for dawah. So I'll still go with the Sunnis, the Salafis, even the Sufis as well, hand out some general books about Islam, once in a while a Quran to someone who's interested. And it's the fact that you need to actually actively be out there speaking to people, like the prophets did, like various apostles did, like the imams. Whoever is trying to spread the religion, it didn't happen simply by walking by someone and them finding you to be a nice person. Because I could find the Pope to be a nice person, it doesn't mean it makes it any more right. Knowledge is obviously the fundamental point for dawah. If you don't have the knowledge, then you're spreading false information. So if they could even focus on one small book that a bunch of people could read to know how to answer different questions for people, then it would really assist in spreading the word of the Ahl Bayt. To spread the knowledge of Islam through social media is very beneficial if you know how you're going to do it, because there's many people who try to do it, but they only end up in arguments and it doesn't actually achieve anything. And social media can obviously help in many different aspects. I currently have a blog at theislamicperspective.org, which is currently a new topic each week that comes on the Friday, and slowly updating the website to add ebooks and different topics from reverts and all different topics. It's just a work in progress, but social media is definitely very beneficial if you know how to use it properly. For those considering becoming Muslim, a couple of words of advice would be to obviously read. It seems very obvious, but it's really important. Many people don't realize and think, I'll listen to this YouTube lecture here, or I'll just take whatever I hear from other Muslim people, and that'll lead you very astray, which in my first 2 years of converting became a big problem, just accepting any information that was given to you. And I highly suggest that you go directly to the best sources you have available, whether it be the Maulana that is nearby, or even if you have to travel 100 kilometers to get to the Maulana. They will give you much better answers than just typing in on Facebook, what do you guys think of this or that? A final message for the viewers who are already Muslim would be that they should actually focus on what they're being taught within Jummah, within a Thursday night program, not just sit there, come for the community like many people do. If you take one thing out of a lecture and implement that in your life, it can drastically change every other aspect of your life. For me, I love to encounter Muslims all the time. I love encountering non-Muslims and talking about Islam, bringing up the topic, no matter where I am, what time of day, it doesn't matter. Since I live in Peterborough at the moment, there's very few Muslims, so when I see a Muslim, it makes me extremely happy to see them, and they immediately come to me and start talking to me about why I converted, like many other Muslims all the time, and about so many different things.